In the previous video, when we examined the descriptive statistics for one categorical variable, there were 4 different statistics that we used: frequency, proportional frequency, cumulative frequency, and cumulative proportional frequency. When we examine the descriptive statistics for 2 categorical variables at one time, we'll be using frequency, proportional frequency, and marginals. So when we're looking at 2 different categorical variables, we use what's called a contingency table or a cross-tabulation table to examine the data. In our example, let's say we want to examine the responses to item 1 and the responses to years participating. In order to examine the frequency counts for these, we're going to use the table function. And within the table function, we'll pass in our item 1 variable, as well as our years participating variable. And you'll see that the output is our cross-classification table. So here we see the number of people that responded strongly disagree to item 1 that have also been participating in lessons less than 1 year is 3. The number of people who responded disagree to item 1 who also responded less than 1 year of years participating is 35. Notice here that when we use the table function, the variable that we specify first is on the left-hand side and represents the rows, and the variable that we specify second represents the columns moving across the table. Now we can do the same thing, only having the output reflect proportional frequencies. In order to make this code a little bit easier, let's again use the same table function, but let's store it in an object. Let's call the object item 1 years participation cross-class, which stands for cross-classification table. And then we'll assign our table function to it. Now in order to show the proportional frequencies, we're going to use the prop.table function. And then we'll pass in our object, item 1, years participating cross-class. And then now we see our proportional frequencies. Now in order to clean this up a little bit, let's pass it through the round function, and then we'll specify 2 digits. And so we see here that a total of 2% of the participants responded strongly disagree to item 1 that also responded less than 1 year for years participating. A total of 23% of the respondents responded disagree to item 1 that also responded less than 1 year for years participating. Now marginals provide for us the summed frequencies or the summed proportional frequencies across the rows or down the columns of the contingency tables that we develop. In other words, what they really are our frequencies and our proportional frequencies for each of the univariate categorical variables that we're examining. And as you may remember, we examined these as univariate categorical variables in the last video. So in order to calculate the marginals, we can use the margin.table function. So we have the table function that we created and we stored it in an object called item 1 years participating cross-class. Let's pass this through the margin.table function. And now we need to specify whether we want to sum across the columns or down the rows. So first, let's calculate the frequency row marginals. In other words, we're going to sum across the columns. We could do this by specifying the value of 1. And so we see here that we have a total of 3 people that responded strongly disagree, 59 people that responded disagree, 65 people that responded agree, and 23 people that responded strongly agree. Now note that this is the same output that we would get if we use the summary function and then pass item 1 through that summary function. Now if we want to sum down the rows, we could use the same command, only we're going to change this to the value of 2. So we have a total of 92 people that responded less than 1 year, 39 people that responded 1 to 2 years, etc. Again, this is the same output we would see if we use the summary function and pass in the years participating variable. Now, similar to before, what we can also report are the proportional frequencies for these. In order to do that, we're going to use the margin argument within the prop.table function. So we'll use the prop.table function. Again, we'll specify the object containing the table function. And in order to calculate the proportional row marginals, we'll use the margin argument and we'll specify the value 1. And now we have the proportions for the sums across the columns. Now again, to clean this up, we can use the round function and we'll specify 2 digits. Now if we want to report the column marginals, we'll use the same command, but we'll change the margin argument to 2. And now we have our proportional row marginals. So in order to report summary statistics for 2 categorical variables, we can report the frequency, proportional frequency, frequency marginal, and proportional marginal. Now we can do this quickly by using the cross-table function from the gmodels package. I already have the gmodels package saved, so I'm just going to load it using the library function. So here we're going to use the cross-table function. We'll pass in the item 1 variable. And then we'll pass in our years participating variable. Let me clear this out. We'll run the command. And you'll see that we have the output here for the cross table function. So here at the top, we have our cell contents box, and the cell contents tells us exactly what we see in the box. So we have the frequency for each level within both variables. We have our chi-square contribution. Chi-square contribution is basically a statistic that's our measure of how the expected values compared to the actual observed values, which suggests whether or not the responses to item 1 are statistically dependent or independent of the responses to years participating. A value of p less than 0.05 suggests that they're independent. We have our n row total, which is our proportional row marginals. We have our n column total, which are our proportional column margins. We have our n table total, which are the proportional frequencies. Here we have our column total, which are the frequency counts and proportional frequencies for our years participating variable. And then we have our row total, which are the frequency counts and the proportional frequencies for our item 1 variable.